In 1602, a group of Dutch merchants did something no one had done before. They incorporated, not a country, not a king, a company with shareholders, dividends, a board of directors, and the legal right to wage war. That last part is the one history tends to skim past. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company, was granted powers that no corporation had ever held. The right to build forts, sign treaties, mint currency, execute prisoners, raise armies, command fleets. It wasn't a trading company with military protection. It was a sovereign power wearing the face of commerce. And it governed millions of people for nearly 200 years. This wasn't accidental. The Dutch Republic designed it that way. Competing Dutch merchants were destroying each other's margins in the spice trade, undercutting, overcrowding, bleeding profits. So they merged. And in the merger, they gave the new entity something no private institution had ever been handed: the authority of a state without the accountability of one. The VOC could go to war, and it didn't have to answer to anyone for doing it. Here is what most people miss. The spice trade wasn't valuable because spices were rare. It was valuable because the VOC made them rare. Control the supply, control the price, control the routes, control the islands where the plants grew. And if anyone on those islands tried to trade with someone else, punish them. Visibly. Finally, Jan Pieterszoon Coen understood this better than anyone. Coen became Governor General of the VOC's Asian operations in 1619. He didn't think like a merchant. He thought like a conqueror. Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, was built as his headquarters. Not a trading post, a fortified city, a seat of power. The VOC's capital in Asia, surrounded by walls, cannon, and the threat of what happened to those who resisted. And Banda showed what resistance cost. The Banda Islands were the only place on Earth where nutmeg grew naturally. The VOC wanted exclusive control. The Bandanese refused. In 1621, Coen sent in the troops. What followed wasn't a negotiation or a blockade. It was erasure. The Bandanese population, estimated at 15,000, was killed, enslaved, or driven from the islands entirely. Those who survived fled into the forest. VOC soldiers and their Japanese mercenaries moved through the archipelago systematically. When it was over, the company repopulated the islands with Dutch colonists and enslaved workers and ran them as corporate plantations. Not a conquest, a restructuring. This is the part that makes the VOC something other than a historical curiosity. It wasn't behaving like a company that had gotten too powerful. It was behaving exactly as it was designed to behave. Violence was not a failure of the system. Violence was the system. The monopoly required enforcement. Enforcement required force. Force required an institution capable of deploying it without restraint. The VOC had all three. By the mid-1600s, it controlled the flow of nutmeg, cloves, and pepper across the known world. Its fleet was larger than most European navies. Its private army held fortresses from the Cape of Good Hope to the coast of Japan. Local rulers across the archipelago had signed contracts, not treaties between equals, but instruments of subordination drafted in Amsterdam, enforced at gunpoint. The VOC didn't trade with Indonesia. It administered it. And here is the reframe that changes everything. The company's real product was never spices. Spices were the justification. The product was control. Over territory, over populations, over the conditions of exchange. Every ship, every soldier, every massacre, every contract imposed on a local sultan, all of it was infrastructure. Not for trade, for dominance, the monopoly, the army, the right to execute, the forts, the forced labor, the erased populations. This was not the cost of doing business. This was the business. The VOC declared bankruptcy in 1799, but the system it built didn't collapse with it. The Dutch colonial state that followed inherited the territory, the logic, and the architecture of extraction. What the company had established as corporate policy became government policy. The violence was nationalized. The control deepened. And Indonesia would live inside that system for another century and a half. This pattern isn't unique to Indonesia. It didn't begin with the VOC, and it didn't end when the company dissolved. Because the question the VOC forces us to ask is not whether corporations can become too powerful. It's whether power, once structured this way, ever really changes its shape. The man who built this system, who designed the massacres, founded Batavia, and wrote the logic of corporate empire into Dutch colonialism was Jan Pieterszoon Coen. His story was darker than the institution he served, how one man turned a trading company into a blueprint for 3 centuries of colonial rule. That's next.